Good morning. Today is the 28th day of Cheshvan and 12th of November. We're starting a new parsha, Parashat Toldot. And here we begin to see another installment of one of the main differences between the way that the Bible sets up struggle and conflict and the way that it's usually seen in the Western world. The Bible focuses on conflict that is intergenerational, meaning, intragenerational, meaning it's within the generation itself, that there are different forces vying for power, and they struggle. So most often it'll be pictured as two siblings who are fighting against one another. So we saw this in the beginning of the Bible with Cain and Abel, and until now we've seen it between Isaac and Ishmael, and now we're coming into the what is actually the last stage of Abraham's people being galvanized and purified, and the struggle this time is between Esau and Jacob. But this struggle is different. It's not the same. Until now, these struggles have been between children that were separate from one another. They weren't twins. But here, Jacob and Esau, they come from the same womb. They literally are born together. And the struggle begins even when they're in the womb. And so we read in the first verses of this parsha, the boys wrestled in Rebeccah's womb. And she said, "If so, why do I exist?" She went to inquire of God. God answered her, "Two nations are in your womb. Two separate peoples shall issue from your body. One people shall be mightier than the other, and the older shall succumb to the younger." So this is a very interesting analysis. It's saying that from the very moment they're formed, they're in some kind of conflict, but this conflict has to be resolved in some way. Why? Because they come from the same mother and same father. In a certain sense, this is like the conflict between Cain and Abel, because Cain and Abel also came from the same mother and same father. There is a little bit of a difference, because we usually say that Cain was affected by the poison of the snake. Meaning, in other words, we say that Eve was influenced in some way by the snake, and that went into the formation of her first offspring, who was Cain. And by the time Abel came out, he didn't have any of that poison left over. Still, when you read in the Torah's inner dimension, the struggle between Cain and Abel continues throughout the generations. Always. There's always souls who come from the side of Cain, and there are always souls who come from the side of Abel. Now I mentioned that the way that the Western world usually sees these conflicts, as they see it as intergenerational, meaning that it's between father and son, not between the people in the same generation. And it's a very different type of struggle. We won't get into it right now. I'm just mentioning it just to notice this. That in the Torah, constantly the struggle is between siblings within the same generation. It's as if the Torah is saying, whatever you need to work out is actually between the people of the same age. It's not between the elders and the younger generation. That's not where the conflict is. Because the world is constantly developing. The development is always in a good direction. But within each stage of this evolution, there needs to be a figuring out of what the truth is. Meaning, in other words, we need to learn how to live together in such a way that we can join forces. So let's look a little bit at what did they have to argue about in the womb? It's not exactly a normal thing, but obviously what it's trying to say is that at their essence, Jacob and Esau have some kind of conflict. Rashi says like this. He says when Rebeccah would pass by the entrances to Shem and Aver's places of Torah study, and we already met Shem and Aver earlier, so Jacob hastened to be born. But when she passed by a doorway of idol worship, Esau struggled to get out. So it would just seem to be that Jacob is looking for Torah, he's looking for the tradition that came from Adam through Noach, through Shem and Aver, his child and great-grandson, and then went on to Abraham. And we mentioned last week that Abraham had studied, I think actually 2 weeks ago, and also 1 week ago, that Abraham had studied by Shem. He was his teacher. And Esau, for some reason, is going backwards. And he wants to join forces with the idolaters. What exactly is this? We'll see a lot more about this when we come to the 5th reading. There's going to be a lot more discussion in depth of why Esau is so connected to the idol worshippers when it shouldn't be that way. He's the grandson of Abraham. He's the son of Isaac. Where did this come from? But just to look at it from a simpler answer to this question, let's look at a commentary that was given by Shmuel of Shinov. He was a student of Reb Simcha Bunim of Pershischa. And he writes like this. He says, "It is known that our patriarchs and matriarchs would approach strangers in order to convert them to belief in the one God, the Creator. And this necessitated using logic and philosophy in order to speak to the idol worshippers and prove to them that there was no substance to their beliefs." This is all his commentary on this. So he says, we know that the 4th revolution that we keep talking about is actually nothing new. The first ones to engage in it were Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Well, at least Abraham and Isaac, as we'll see in a moment. Abraham made many converts in Haran before he came to the land of Canaan. And Isaac did the same, apparently. He kept talking to the Philistines, all those around him. They were constantly trying to spread the light and the knowledge of one God. So says Reb Shmuel of Shinov, he says like this, this is what the doorway to idol worship refers to. So when it says that Rebeccah passed by a doorway of idol worship, it doesn't mean that this really meant that she was... Why would she go near a place like that? Why would she go near an idolatrous place of worship? So Esau would be struggling to get out at that time because he was from the impure side and wanted to connect with the idolaters. He could not hear the positive and sacred words that were uttered in such a meeting with an idolater. So what was going on? Esau was attracted to the people themselves. He wasn't attracted to the process of conversion. He was actually attracted to the connection with the idolaters themselves. Jacob, on the other hand, would have nothing to do with these discussions. It was only after the idolater would convert and learn Torah in a Beit Medrash, meaning in a Torah academy, for the purpose of serving the Creator, that Jacob would feel the need to connect with them. So what is he saying here? He's saying that it's a very difficult task to bring the words of Torah to people who are not connected to God. It's something that a lot of people don't realize. There are many people that I speak to, for instance, I speak to and Rabbi Ginsburg speaks to and so on, who the moment that they hear that you in some way want to engage someone who is not Jewish with Torah, they immediately run away from that. They can't stand that type of discussion. Why? Because obviously there's going to be, within a discussion like that, a lot of things that someone who has the clarity of Torah is not going to be very happy with. So what do? So they say, we have to close ourselves up. We can't do this. If somebody already converts, we're very happy to meet them. If somebody already says, I'm willing to accept your point of view, I'm willing to convert, so okay. But that's not how the world works. that purity of thought is maybe good for some people, and some people can uphold it. But if we really want to change the world, we have to do what Rebeccah did. We have to do what Isaac did. We have to do what Abraham and Sarah did. We have to go out to the world and speak to them. And even though the discussion at times can be very difficult for us because we're hearing things that we know are completely false, they're wrong, they aggrandize a human being as God in some cases, or even not as God, even if they aggrandize him as a prophet. Or, on the other hand, on the other extreme, with Islam for instance, that they don't have any respect for the image of God in man, that they can't respect it, they don't understand what that means. And so they see man as just a more complex animal. When they have attitudes that are very difficult for us to tolerate because we've grown accustomed to a certain way of relating to God. So these things are very heavy on the Jacobs in the Jewish people. On the other hand, there are those who are running to do this because they're like Esav. They're like Esau. They're not doing it because they're not connected to this idea because they want to change the world. They just want the connection. They just feel that the connection is important for them, for whatever reason that it could be. And they can't fight the influence that one would have when engaging in these discussions. So really what this is saying is that in the end, even though we have within us, within each one of us, we have an Jacob and an Esau, and the Jacob in us is running away from these discussions, and the Esau is coming for the wrong reasons, we have to be like Rebeccah. We have to be like Rebeccah, able to be modest like she was, and careful to raise her children in holiness and purity, but knowing that what we have a responsibility to do is to bring the world closer to God in the way that the Torah that was given by God reveals him and reveals his will, reveals his intent, and reveals the purpose of humanity, the purpose of life. And even though, again, the Jacob in us and the Esau in us make it difficult, we still have to do what Rebeccah did, even though she feels, why then am I here? Why then? It's like an existential crisis. Why is it so difficult? Yet that is the purpose of this generation, as Rav Ginsburg has stated many times, and it's especially in times like this, I've been repeating this over the last month, that there is a war between good and evil, and it is at these times that moral certitude and moral clarity needs to be found. And when it's found, it changes a generation. I want to mention that 75, 80 years ago, the entire world basically had to fight this type of war against Nazi Germany. And the moral clarity that came out of that war has served the Western world tremendously until now. To a certain degree, that moral clarity has been transformed or replaced by moral relativism. And I believe that what we're facing now is the need to reclaim that certainty that they were called the greatest generation had, and that this will build the world into a much, much better place afterwards. So we all need to be Rebeccah in that sense. And we have to engage in it, we have to discuss it, we have to explain our stance, we have to explain what the Torah expects us to do. And through that, we will gain a great deal in our character, our national characters, in our character as a civilization, and in the hope for the future, that the future can be completely different. Thank you very much for joining.